The eyes of the world will be on the United Kingdom tomorrow as King Charles III is crowned at Westminster Abbey alongside his wife, Camilla, the Queen Consort, in a quintessentially British display of pomp and pageantry. The coronation, which will be conducted by the Archbishop of Canterbury, will be kick-started 3 days, or we will kick-start 3 days of celebrations across the UK. For updates on the coronation preparations, we are now joined by Arise correspondent Judita da Silva outside Buckingham Palace in central London. Good morning, Judita. Ahead of tomorrow's coronation, let's begin with the Stone of Destiny. And why does King Charles III need it in London for his coronation?
Okay, so the Stone of Destiny, or the Stone of Scone, goes way back to Celtic mythology. And according to Celtic mythology, it was believed to be the stone that Jacob, descendant of Isaac and Abraham, slept on for 3,000 years. And when he slept upon it, he received messages from angels. Upon his death, it journeyed through Palestine, Egypt, Sicily, Spain, and finally landed in Ireland, where it was set on in 700 BC thereabouts on the hill of Tara, where all the ancient Irish kings were coronated. Then they were invaded by Celtic Scots, who then took the stone down to the village of Scone, hence its name, the Stone of Scone. The last Scottish king, Joseph, I think it was Balliol, but don't quote me on that, he was coronated on the stone, and then Edward I invaded, and he took the stone to Westminster Abbey, where he was coronated and he had the stone set beneath a wooden chair, which became the coronation chair, and every sovereign, king or queen of Great Britain, is coronated upon it. And it's meant to symbolize that Scotland lies underneath the reign of the British throne and the British monarch.
Well, let's talk about the event itself. What are the major highlights that we should be looking forward to, particularly in terms of the connection between this particular coronation, the first in 70 years, and Britain's colonial past? Because I've seen an attempt to link colony with the present and tomorrow's event.
See, the issue with that is that any coronation in Britain is so steeped in history, and that history is diffused to the viewing public through symbolism, and it's going to be rich in symbolism, and that symbolism, unfortunately, is inextricably linked to the conquest of empire. With the conquest of empire, that links to slavery. When you look at the diamond that is going to be set in the imperial state crown, that's the Cullinan diamond. That came from South Africa. The people of South Africa have asked for its return because it's believed to be one of the largest diamonds that have ever been found. But Edward VII had it split into 9 large diamonds by the Royal Asher Diamond Company, and 96 smaller diamonds that were given to the Asher family. And those two of the 2 biggest ones of the 9 diamonds were set in the crown and the scepter. We will see that on the Queen Consort Camilla's head. That is an issue, because when you think about the symbolism of pride and prestige and position, that position came at the expense of peoples that were believed to be lesser than. That is a problem that you have when you think of when you think of the British Empire. And unfortunately, the sovereign represents the very head of that empire, which has been so problematic in its creation. The Colonel diamond, which was there beforehand, we saw from Queen Elizabeth II's funeral, that was taken out of the crown because it's too much of a bone of contention with the Indian people, who believe it should be returned. But again, this is part of what makes Britain Britain. And the conversations that moments like this stimulate is that there is a certain narrative that exists that has been doctored to promote the prestige of the country, as opposed to any culpability or any accountability for what was done to achieve that prestige. So there's a duality that will kind of seep through the entirety of the coronation. But then again, when you think of any country, at the expense of others, you find greatness. So there is always a victor and there's always the victim.
Truth has to be said, on the political side, King Charles III will be taking on a much leaner Commonwealth. Only yesterday, a Jamaican official said by 2024 they'll be pushing for that final referendum to be on their own, to be able to have their own president, to cease being under the crown. And vis-a-vis the fact that the last coronation we had in 52, if my memory serves me right, in the UK, predominantly Britain was a very white country and was largely Christian. Over 50% of the population was Christian. This coronation, you've got over 20% ethnic minorities in the UK, and most people are not Christians any longer. I mean, talk me through all of that conversation.
I think that is probably the most fascinating thing about this era in history. In 2023, unlike any other time before, you have the emancipation of ethnic minorities, but to a degree where it's an emancipation of thought as well as action. Never as a generation felt so activated to pursue change. And when you think about it today, they sit as a country with an Indian prime minister and an Indian home secretary. So Britain today is a very different country. So when you think about people wanting emancipation from the Commonwealth, whether it's Jamaica, whether it's Australia, or even the looming shadow of a referendum in Scotland, it's because people feel there must be an equity and recognition of being an independent nation in order to really move towards the avenue of equality and friendship. There is no contention between them. It's just this unwillingness to have the capacity of change to the degree where you say, even though we are Britain, there are other equal countries who have benefited us in becoming the Britain we call great. And we are willing to stand side by side with them in celebration of any moment, be it a coronation of a king or the death of the previous monarch.
All right, Juditha, I'd like you to tell us about the feeling of the people in Britain, across England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, with regards to this coronation. A number of people have said it is not necessary, it's a huge waste of taxpayers' money for some people, whilst the British government view it as an opportunity to generate revenue. In fact, they're looking at generating up to £360 million this long weekend as a result of the coronation. They've talked about the fact that he doesn't need an elaborate show like this to be king. I mean, Edward VIII didn't need a coronation to become sovereign. So what's the feeling of people? Are people excited? Do we have royal watches outside? Are people looking to having a big British lunch outside this weekend? What's the feeling of people at this time?
Simply put, it's the entire spectrum. You have those who have been camping out for days to have prime position along the route on the Mall, and that most prestigious position that you can see behind me, which is the balcony at Buckingham Palace, where everything will come to the final culmination of the day. But then you have others. There's a cost of living crisis in the country post-COVID. They feel that a reported £250 million price tag for the coronation is excessive, particularly at this time. But then when you think of what Britain represents, which is tradition and history, one of the most storied histories of any country in the world, a moment like this is significant because it will go down for the rest of time, and generations after will study what happened on May the 6th. But then you have countries like Scotland, who, yes, in pursuit of a referendum, really abhor what is going to happen on May the 6th. And we saw the manifestation of that in the Celtic Rangers game, where the entire stadium was chanting obscenities at the king-to-be. Ireland has its own sentiments, Wales has its own sentiments. But at the end of the day, what makes a nation is symbolism and tradition, and that must always be recognized and respected.
Well, Juditha, let's talk a little about invitations. I see Lord Patten complaining about the Chinese sending the vice president instead of President Xi Jinping. There have also been some people that will be there. I've seen the Asante Hene, Osei Tutu II of Ghana, with his wife, visiting the king ahead of the event tomorrow. We know that President Buhari has also been invited. Do you know of any other special invitations, guests that we should look out for? Is it only President Buhari that has been invited from Nigeria? No other person apart from President Buhari and Tiwa Savage, is going to perform in honor of the king.
I love how you can be so serious and ask such a sassy question at the same time. But yes, even though it's a celebration, there are certain protocols that must be recognized and followed through with. World leaders across the world have been invited. What you find is this is very different to Queen Elizabeth's funeral. This is an affair of state without the extra layer of sentimentality. But everyone would want to be represented, especially if you have a relationship with this country. The king is a constitutional monarch who works in tandem with the prime minister. For you to not recognize this day, it sets a sour taste within that relationship going forward. But so what you will find is a lot of countries, based on where they may be at this time economically, governmentally, what they might be going through, if the leader doesn't come, a representative definitely will. So, for instance, we know that Jill Biden has been going around town meeting local people before the arrival of Joe Biden, and they will be in attendance. But yes, invitations were sent to all world leaders, and we will see whether they attend in person or they send a representative, but their countries will most definitely be represented.
Right. The symbolism is different this time. About 50 years ago, the last coronation, over 1952, I should say. 53. The last coronation, there was sort of like this verve. You know, it was just after the World War. And there was this get up and go spirit. You know, people wanted to get back to their lives. But this time, it's just after a war too. The COVID war, and our lives has really changed. But we've got cost of living crisis in the UK, which is biting hard. I want you to talk me through the symbolism. I also want you to talk me through the symbolism of Westminster, you know, in the heart of British culture on coronations like this. And the fact that Charles himself, when his mother's coronation was happening, was just a 4-year-old lovely baby boy. But you can see him today, 70 years after. He's taking that same position his mother took when he was just 4.
I mean, the first part was, when you think of it, the coronation in 53 was on the back of the war. It was about triumph. It was about survival and enduring against adversity. This is a different tone. There is an adversity that hasn't been come out of definitively, so it is a coronation on the back of hurt and in the wake of struggle. So that's why, you know, King Charles has been so open and vocal and active in saying it's a scaled back coronation, to show that he recognizes the sentiment of the day. And there's also has to be an awareness of reading the room when he goes about doing what he must do, because this is his duty. This isn't something he does by choice. He is destined to do it as being in the line of succession. Now, when you think of Westminster Abbey, King Charles is of the House of Windsor. This goes all the way back to William the Conqueror. He was the first king of a unified England post the endeavors of Alfred I of Wessex, who fought the Vikings to unify England. The first king of England was William the Conqueror. And he was coronated in Westminster Abbey all the way back then. And through the Normans to the Saxons to the Angevins to the Plantagenets, the houses of York and Lancaster, the Tudors, the Stuarts, and all that followed, the Saxe-Coburgs, and then the House of Windsor, they have been at Westminster. That is the significance of this place. Every king, every queen is coronated there upon the wooden coronation chair. When people talk about history, it's hard to compete with Britain, and their recognition of it and their respect for it and their preservation of it. And, you know, when you come to symbolism, I think possibly it's about a different kind of unification on a multi-layered level. Take, for instance, the Cross of Wales, which has been made from Welsh slate, reclaimed wood, and recycled silver. It will have 2 pieces of what is believed is a true cross. That is the cross that Jesus was crucified on. It was sent to the king by Pope Francis. It was done in an ecumenical gesture to unify the Christian peoples of the world. And by giving it to King Charles, you're making him custodian of peoples beyond his nation, because you're saying there's a golden trifecta of faith, loyalty, and duty. The faith of a people, the duty of a nation, the faith of the people, the loyalty of a nation, and the duty of a king. That is the level that this operates at. So when Charles sits on that throne, there is a weight of responsibility borne on his shoulders that goes far beyond a crown and a scepter.
Well, thank you very much, Judita da Silva, and we look forward to tomorrow. That's Judita da Silva, the Arise News correspondent, covering King Charles III's coronation ahead of the main event tomorrow. Someone described that event, that tomorrow it will be a jaw-dropping event.